So today I'd like to talk to you about one of my most favorite bikes, my 1942 Harley WLC. So I got this bike about 9 years ago out of a collection. It was actually been sitting at a Harley shop on display for quite a few years, hadn't run in 20, 25 years, something like that, whatever. And he had three 45s there, so three 1942 Harleys. And so when I refer to 45, I mean 45 cubic inches. 1942, 45 cubic inches is kind of a common way of describing these bikes. So he had three bikes there, and the Harley shop had closed down, and he asked for my opinion on a few bikes. He had probably about 20, so I gave him a kind of a brief rundown on all the bikes. And this one was the roughest of the three. And I looked at it, there was a lot of issues with it, and not running, hadn't run in 20 years. But you know what? He convinced me to take it and look at selling it for him. So I got, I brought it home, had a few people come look at it, and I didn't put any work into it. And the longer it sat on my lift in my shop, the more I just kind of fell for it. I don't know why, all of a sudden it really hit me. I really wanted this bike. So made a deal with him, and it had good compression. And once I owned it, I thought, well, I better, first thing, let's get it running, because I got a pretty good deal on it. And did some work, took the carb apart, went through it, changed fluids, put a new battery in, typical spring kind of servicing, really. And it fired up. And I had a friend who was pretty knowledgeable on 45s, and he came down, and he was one of the guys I had offered it to him. And once he heard it running, he was actually, kind of like, wow, hey, is that for sale still? And I said, no, I bought it. So I proceeded to do a bit of work on it. It had yellow rims. It was, like Model T color rims, and it was kind of hideous as far as that color. And I did some work on it and got it running really well, and rode it the next summer. And it rode so well that it became my main ride. And it's been my most ridden motorcycle in the last 9 years. And I'm about wore out. It needs to be gone through. The valves have no more adjustments left, but it still runs, so I'm gonna keep riding it until it's, basically I can't, because I love this bike. I love riding it. I love everything about it. And so one of the things I did over the years is I tore it down once, almost to the frame, but I left the motor in, and I repainted the frame with a brush, like a cheap paint job, just to kind of clean it up. I painted the bars and painted the forks and painted the wheels, and it's showing its age now, but it looked a lot fresher then. And this wasn't my first Harley 45 or WL, WLA, WLC. I had the Survey car. Had some issues with that one when I built it, learning, 25 years old at the time. But once I started riding this bike, it really became apparent that everything I had heard about these bikes was wrong. Everyone's they didn't have a lot of great things to say about Harley 45s. All my friends all my friends are older than me. Most of my friends are in their mid to late 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they all grew up riding shovelheads and Evos, and they really didn't have anything good to say about 45s. It was always, they're just slow, not reliable, and it went on and went on and went on. Like that was the completely common response to a Harley 45. No one wanted them. Don't buy one. You know, they're not great bikes. Well, I get on this thing and I ride it. I ride it everywhere. I actually did a ride with one of my buddies. We did we were supposed to be 1,000 miles in 36 hours. And all over the province of Manitoba. And we had done 650 miles, and I just gotten gas, and we were gonna probably push to do 725, 750 that day. And stopped for gas, and as soon as I left the gas station, it started running really rough, and I thought, oh man, I got some bad fuel. And it turned out my main power wire to my battery had broken. But because I had a heat shrink on it, it was still touching and then sporadically. So you'd roll on the throttle, and, you know, the vibrations would stable out and it would run perfect. And then you get to a point and it would start breaking up. So anyway, we pulled into the next town. At that point, my battery died because I guess it wasn't charging. And we stayed there for the night, but we did 650 miles that day, and this bike didn't miss a beat. It 60, 65 miles an hour all day, and that wasn't the only time I've done some, you know, decent miles in a day on this bike. Another Saturday, I had probably 500 miles, and it was over 30 degrees, 35 degrees that day, and flawless, ran flawless. This bike, you know, air-cooled engine, I couldn't believe it was. I mean, it was hot when I was stopping, but it just kept going. It just honestly didn't miss a beat. It was amazing. And I just enjoy riding this bike immensely. So I'll go through it a little bit, some of the features about it. So this is a hand shift, 3-speed transmission, 3-speed, hand shift tank, like hand shift on the tank, so tank shift. Right hand throttle, left hand spark advance and retard. You got the gas on the right, you got oil on the left. It's got it's a rigid frame, no suspension in the rear, but the seat has suspension. So in the seat there's a pogo, that's what they call it. It's a series of springs on a rod which collapses and gives you suspension travel. I put on a set of extra support springs that would normally be used on a 2-up seat, but I'm a heavier guy. I put these on that seat, and what it does is it stops this continuous, like, up and down. I have the bolt up and down, where you're kind of bouncing around all day, and what it does is it stiffens it up. You sit nice and square, but it still has suspension travel, so it's so comfortable. I mean, I did 650 miles on this bike, and I got off like I'd been on the couch all day. It was absolutely very comfortable to ride. One of the other features is it's a 6-volt system, Springer front end, internal throttle spark advance, so the wires are inside the bars. It has a fuel rod as opposed to a petcock that most people are used to. So the fuel rod is just a rod that goes through the tank. It's tapered at one end, it goes into a taper, and as you screw it in, it shuts off the fuel. As you unscrew it, it opens up the fuel. Some of the mods I did was I added a military rack. So this would be 1943 WLC and 4243 WLA. So when I refer to this as a WLC, this is a Canadian version of an American bike. So the Canadian government stipulated a series of changes that the American bikes had. One of them was interchangeable wheels. So they used big twin springers, Springer rockers, big twin front brake, big twin wheel assembly. There was an auxiliary hand clutch that came out. Just, you know, if you're in the war and you're riding, and you have a foot clutch and you're in mud, the one thing you want to do is put your feet down. Can't put your feet down on this because that's your clutch. So they asked Harley to add a hand clutch, which I believe is the first hand clutch Harley had. I think until 52, when the Panhead had an option, had started introducing the foot shift hand clutch. So 10 years earlier, the Canadian government asked Harley to install an auxiliary hand clutch. So another feature. I never put it on, never found the need for it myself. I'm not in the war and I'm not riding through a bunch of mud all the time. So again, this would have been a WLC, Canadian Army. So it would have looked a lot different. It would have had military fenders, which are very narrow, so you would see more of the tires. It had, so this one's been repainted. The only military part left is really the rear rack. That's not correct for 42. 1942 Canadian had two different styles of passenger seats. I have a new old stock one, but so there was a couple of changes, like I say, between the WLA and the WLC. If you want, you can do some research. There's, I think there's between 12 and 16 different changes. Some are bigger, some are smaller. But some of the military parts missing from here would be the oil bath air cleaner. So this is like a civilian style. It's missing the military skid plate that would go underneath the entire bike. And front fender toolbox, extremely rare. And front fender light, etc., etc. So one of the things I love about these bikes is it's a side valve engine. It's a flathead, so it's a low compression. This bike only came out with 17 to 21 horsepower, and it originally came with a 30-tooth sprocket, I believe. So when I got the bike, it had a 30-tooth sprocket. I was going down the highway at like 50 miles an hour, just revving. It would just, that's all it went. So I went to a 33-tooth front sprocket. That changed the bike dramatically. Now I can do 60, 65 miles an hour, depends on the wind. If you want an honest opinion, if I'm going into wind, I'll drop this bike. It depends on how hard of wind. It'll drop down to 52, 53, 54 miles an hour. But with the wind, it'll do 70 miles an hour. And I've had that documented many times. So you lose a lot of bottom end power, but you gain top end speed. So that was a big improvement. And yeah, this is, what else did I do? I changed the wiring harness, went through the wheels, went through the brakes, went through everything on this bike when I first got it. And it's never let me down, other than I blew 2 batteries up because they were those, they weren't the correct batteries, using those Tri-Cell or wherever they were. They were just not, they weren't good. They couldn't handle the power surge of the generator cutting in and out. And they literally blew it apart. And one other time, I blew primary chain and had it fit. I was back home. I was only 10 minutes away, but I was back home and back on the road in about 45 minutes because I had an extra chain in the house. So what I'm saying is there's been a lot of misconceptions about these bikes. These are solid bikes. You can ride them really hard, and I'll just hold it wide open all day and it just goes. They're still affordable. The price has gone up in the last few years, but they still are affordable. And if you want to experience like a Knucklehead, an original Knucklehead, or a 48 pan, where you have you know, rigid frame, Springer front end, and a tank shift, etc. This is a very affordable way to get into it. Yes, it doesn't have the same amount of power, you know, maybe a little bit different sound, maybe. But the Springer's the same. The wheels are the same. The brakes are the same. The fenders are almost the same. The seat, the riding is the same. The visual, the tanks are still the same visual. There's oil on this one where Knuckleheads didn't have that. And the dash. So you could get almost the same feeling and ride as a Knuckle, except a little bit loss of power because you don't have as much power. You know, a Knucklehead was 1,000 cc and 1,200. This is 750 cc. And a Knucklehead has a 4-speed transmission. This is a 3-speed. So I would recommend anyone, highly recommend, if you ever wanted to ride an old Harley, you always, you know, everyone wants a Knucklehead, get one of these. Because you can get into it, you can ride it, and then you really understand. If you really want to, okay, I really like that bike, but it needs more power, and you want to put that extra large amount of money in to get a Knucklehead, then you already have the idea of how it feels to ride one. Because these, like I say, they're basically the same bike, other than, I mean, the frames are different and stuff. There's a lot of differences, but the same feel, the same experience. So, hold on, I'll go through some of the other highlights of this bike. So again, it's got the big twin front brake. These are 18-inch wheels. You've got your Springer, same style Springer, except this is a 7/8 stem, not a 1-inch stem that a Knucklehead or a 48 pan would have. We got your 3-speed hand shift. And what's interesting is that on my pan head with the sidecar, the difference is on the 45, you got 1, 2, 3. On my pan head, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you get on these bikes, and when I go, you know, from bike to bike, I really got to think about it because I have to, and look, because there is completely opposite shifting patterns. So you got your internal throttle, spark advance, and your internal throttle. It doesn't return. This is just a solid core wire. So it's a little different than newer bikes. You got your M88 carburetor. You can see oil. The primaries, unlike shovel heads, or we'll say 65 pan and later, 1965 and later, they're designed to hold oil in. These aren't. These don't have any seal. It's a backing plate with the primary. So they never were designed to hold oil. They were just designed to allow oil to go on to the chain through a breather from the motor. It's a drip system that goes on, and it just drips onto the chain. And as it gets flung around, it lubricates the chain and then literally drops on the ground. And if you're looking at the two bikes between a big twin, like that one over there, that's a big inch flathead, and a 45, the brake assembly is on the opposite side. So on a big twin, it's on the left side. On a 45, it's on the right side. Just on how the chain comes out of the tranny. On this one, it comes out on your right side by your kicker. So this one needs a real cleanup. You can see, obviously, my battery had left a little bit of battery acid on the frame, on the pipe. Kind of ate some of the paint away and stuff. So we'll have to do a good cleanup on that. But so this is the oil side. And it has a dipstick, so you can tell how much oil you got. And the opposite side, obviously, is your gas. Here's your fuel rod. So you unscrew that, it comes up I explained that earlier. And it's got mechanical brakes, a spring in front end, so there's no hydraulics. And it's a great bike. I can't say enough about these things. If you get a chance to ride one, ride it. It's a lot of fun. So I hope you liked that video on my 1942 Harley. Again, it's one of my favorites. It really got me, I was hooked already on old bikes, but this one really hooked me on 45s to the point where I have a few of them now. And they're just unbelievable bikes. I can't say enough about them. Thanks for all the support. Like and subscribe if you like old motorcycles like I do. And follow along, because we're going to continue working on bikes and riding them. And you're going to see it's spring here now in Manitoba, Canada. And I'm going to be doing a lot of riding on old motorcycles. Thanks again. This is Say the Rest. This is who we are. This is what we do. Have a great day.